It promised justice, equality, and progress, but delivered political subjugation, economic misery, environmental catastrophe. The system was not built to serve, it was built to control.
To continue the side proposition, I call on Professor Ahsan Iqbal.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, I am here to support the motion that liberal democracy has failed the global South. Before I go any further, I think the opening speaker has given me enough ground to support my motion. He has argued in his speech for half of the time that freeing Imran Khan is the victory of liberal democracy. Well, I was wondering when he was speaking whether he's speaking for liberal democracy or Taliban democracy. Because Mr. Imran Khan, commonly known as Mr. Taliban Khan, is a great fan of Taliban democracy. When he was speaking for Imran Khan to be the symbol of liberal democracy, I was wondering in which liberal democracy a leader who is condemned by its Supreme Court to have committed an extra-constitutional act of dissolving the parliament unconstitutionally can be a symbol of liberal democracy. I was wondering that which leader who weaponizes hate in connivance with religious parties to an extent that I stand before you as a symbol of that hate as a weapon when a young man inspired by his hate speeches tried to take my life, and the bullet that still exists in my stomach gives me a taste of Imran Khan's liberal democracy every day. I was wondering which liberal democracy would allow a leader who siphons off 190 million pounds, which are returned to a poor country like Pakistan by United Kingdom, money laundered money caught by National Crime Agency, returned to government of Pakistan, and he siphons off that money and returns that money to his friend whose funds were confiscated in London as black money. He returns that money to him in Pakistan as white money to deposit and settle his fine in Supreme Court. If that is the liberal democracy, I think he makes my case that the proponents of liberal democracy sometimes want to impose corrupt leaders or the martial laws for their own agendas in the name of liberal democracy. This is not liberal democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, liberal democracy was sold as a golden ticket to the world so that it could give freedom, prosperity, and justice. And it was a model which was crafted in the grand halls of global North to be imposed on the streets and fields of global South. We were told it will elevate nations from poverty, safeguard rights, and unlock prosperity. But what happened instead, it delivered death traps, political instability, and broken promises. The paradox is that the nations who crafted and championed are today themselves experiencing the unraveling of liberal democracy. When we read news in United States and in Europe, we read about rising inequality, we read about rising hate speech, we read about rising intolerance. So one is forced to believe whether liberal democracy is also failing the global North. What to say of global South? This failure of liberal democracy in global South is not accidental. It is structural and by design, because the system after the Second World War was given to Global South, not to empower Global South, but to keep Global South under the control of Global North. From inception, the system was built on inequality, as former Secretary General Boutros Ghali said, the world order is not based on justice, but on power, the power of the Global North. Global institutions were not designed to empower Global South, rather to control them. When USSR collapsed, it was said, liberal democracy has won and it is the end of history. And that gave a clear path to liberal democracy to liberate the whole world. But what we saw after those 10 years, that Global South was not any better, but far worse. It was much deeper into debt trap. It was much deeper into political instability. And it was much deeper into social crisis. Political subjugation was rampant. Aid, which was given as a panacea for Global South, turned out that it was a cover to benefit the contractors of the Global North. Martial law regimes were conveniently granted the cover of liberal democracy to rule Global South. Far from being a force of global justice, it became a playground for corporate and power circle lobbyists, geopolitical opportunists, and warmongers. I would just like to highlight 3 failures of liberal democracy in Global South. 1, political double standards. 2, economic exploitation. And 3, environmental injustice. If we look at the political failure of liberal democracy, it promised universal human rights and justice, but we see it is always applied selectively. In Gaza, for months, innocent people were killed under the rubbles of buildings that were destroyed with the most dangerous weapons on the face of the earth. The people were protesting, students were protesting, even students of this university protested, but liberal democracy did not tolerate this dissent, and the students were repressed to stop or keep their noise down. Many students were suspended from universities, were forced to give up their academic programs. So this is the freedom of expression. Similarly, the Security Council resolutions are applied selectively. If it is South Sudan, it is applied. If it is Kashmir, it is conveniently ignored. So the paradox is, the promise was freedom and human rights. The reality is war, genocide, and brutal silencing. How much longer shall Global South have to endure this kind of liberal democracy? The second, economic failure. Liberal democracy championed free markets as pathway to prosperity for all. But for Global South, this so-called free trade has given inequality, poverty, and dependency. Ha Joon Chung, a Korean economist, in his book, Kicking Away the Ladder, says, the richest nation build their wealth through protectionism, only promoting free trade once they had upper hand. And once they feel threatened from Global South, they again invoke protectionism to stop Global South from having access to their markets. Similarly, intellectual property laws are used to sustain technological monopolies. During COVID-19, vaccine apartheid led over 1.3 million preventable deaths in Global South because patent waivers were blocked and denied. Jason Heikel, in his book, The Divide, says that for every $1 in aid, Global South loses $14 through debt repayment and profit repatriation. Similarly, if we see the climate injustice, liberal democracy model fueled environmental destruction while failing to protect Global South, which is on the receiving end. Global North contributed 80% of historical emissions with 20% population. Pakistan, the country I represent, contributes less than 1% to global carbon emissions, but faced one of the worst climate disasters of recent times in 2022, with a cost of $30 billion. And what did liberal democracy do? It asked Pakistan to finance reconstruction and rehabilitation through repurposing the loans which were already approved. So, ladies and gentlemen, the promise was sustainable development. The reality is floods, droughts, broken promises. How much longer Global South shall have to suffer? Verdict is clear. Liberal democracy, crafted in the heart of Global North, has even shaken the soul of Global North. So it promised justice, equality, and progress, but delivered political subjugation, economic misery, environmental catastrophe. The system was not built to serve, it was built to control. Claims of championing freedom in reality turned out to be stealing the sovereignty through economic traps. This is neither democracy nor justice. This is a system rigged to favor the powerful and perpetuate inequality. As Global North grapples with rising inequality, political instability, intolerance, hate, and declining trust in its own institution, it bears witness to the failure of liberal democracy, even in the North. What to say of South? So I would like this House to support and carry the motion that liberal democracy has failed the Global South.